So, hello everyone, and welcome back to STW Sports. I'm host Samuel Wright, joined by Walsall fan Jamie Bates. Well, Jamie, welcome to the show. And firstly, we're going to start off by asking you about Walsall season so far. Currently 15th in Sky Bet League 2, 7 wins this season. Obviously, young manager and Matt Taylor coming in this summer.
Yeah.
How have you found it so far?
I think it's been a very hit and miss season. I think we was obviously very excited with some of the players we recruited, especially when some of the players came in and they started firing straight away, like George Miller did, and that. And then we got our hopes up and we went on a decent run of form. And I think we're lacking a bit of consistency, in my opinion. I think that some games we look really good and we look like we could win and all that, but then we go on and lose. And then other games like we did against Stevenage and that, we look very poor from the get-go. I just think we're missing at the moment George Miller scoring some goals, and we haven't got a clinical goal scorer at the moment.
Yeah, that's fair enough, and that's a good assessment, really. Obviously, a lot of people, Walsall were a mixed one at the start. I think a lot of people did think they'd do well, but other people weren't so sure on them. Last season, Walsall were pretty much the draw specialists, I guess. I think you drew pretty much nearly half of your games last season. Comparing it to last season, obviously it was a different season. All season was behind closed doors.
Yeah.
How do you compare this season and last season?
I think it's obviously good that the fans are back, and I think that we do look slightly better this season than last. I think, obviously, especially defensively, recruiting Menyes on a proper signing standalone was a very good deal for us. But I think that there is still parts that are missing from the whole squad, and I think there's place in the whole squad we could improve. But from last season, I think there is improvements, but that ain't obviously shown with the league standing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, very competitive league this season. Like I say, the fans being back in makes a huge difference to every club as well. What about Matt Taylor then? Obviously, last season, many people say Darryl Clark leaving kind of ruined Walsall's season in a way. Never easy when a manager leaves midway through a season. So Matt Taylor, though, I mean, obviously, he's a young manager. Obviously, he was a very good player in his day as well.
Yeah.
What do you make of Taylor so far? Has he made a good impression for you? And do you think he's a man who could take the club forward?
We need to give him more time, obviously. We can't really judge him just yet because he hasn't had long enough at the club. Obviously, at the moment, the record and that ain't looking the best. But I think overall he's done a decent job with what he's been handed because obviously, especially at the moment with Taylor leaving and Monte being out for still a fair few games, we haven't got many defensive options or anything. So he's trying his best to work with what he's got in front of him. So far, I think he's done a decent job, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you now about the weekend's game. It was a 2-0 defeat away at Mansfield Town, but in truth, Mansfield are flying at the moment. I think they are the form team in League Two, or arguably even the country. So it was never going to be an easy game for Walsall travelling up to Mansfield at the One Call Stadium. What did you make of the game anyway? Was it a little bit of an off day for Walsall? Did you think Mansfield, with the form they're in, it was always going to be tough?
I did expect before the game going into it that we are going to lose today because I thought Mansfield are the most unformed team in the league at the moment. So I thought it's going to be a very difficult game today. But I did think that we looked a little bit better than we did against Stevenage, in my opinion, especially considering we was playing a much stronger opponent. And I do think that we did try a bit more, but I think it was while then they was just better than us. They was more clinical and I think we had our chances, but they had more in a sense. So
yeah, going to ask now about your going to actually ask about the game coming up. You've got Saturday. It's the Matt Taylor derby on Saturday, Walsall versus Exeter City. Exeter obviously are having a good season, really. I mean, they're always there and abouts in the playoffs somewhere. It's at home though. You're back at the Bank Stadium and you follow it up with a home game against Bradford City. What are your thoughts going to the Exeter game, though? Do you fancy your chances in that one?
I'm trying to be optimistic and hoping that we can get a result in that game. But obviously, as you said, Exeter are having a very good season. I think we've got a few tough games coming up, in fairness. But I'm hoping to try and bounce back from the past few results and just try and get... I wouldn't mind taking at least a point against Exeter, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. I mean, obviously, Exeter, like I say, really tough game, but with it being at home, that might give you a bit of an advantage. Going to ask some memory questions now for you, Jamie. Going to start with 2007's League Two win. I'm not sure if you would have been a Walsall fan at this point or how much you remembered of it, but is it a memory you have fondly, the 2007 League Two title win?
Because I'm only 20 at the moment, so I would have been very young when that was. Obviously, my dad's also a Walsall fan, so he tells me little bits and that. But I don't really know too much about it per se. So,
yeah, no, that's fair enough. Obviously, 12 straight years in League One after that as well. We've been in League One. What do you think the difference between League One and Two is? Or have you noticed any differences in the two leagues?
I think there's a fair bit of difference because there is some very strong opposition in League One at the moment. I think a lot stronger than there is in League Two, because you're seeing some of the teams in League One that used to be a very stable Premier League clubs like Sunderland and Portsmouth and that. But I do think that League One was a good league to be in. It was a steady league for us to be in. And then the day we got relegated to League Two, as everyone thought when we was going down, we were one of the favourites to come straight back up. But I don't think that's the case. I think League Two is also a very difficult league. But I think hopefully in the next coming years, if the investment is right or we can get a good squad, hopefully I can see us going back up into League One.
Yeah, also as well, one playoff push it was in League One, 2016. Unfortunately, you were beaten by Barnsley in the playoff semi-finals. Memories of that, really? And obviously, Barnsley are always a club who tend to go between Championship and League One. You see them right now, bottom of the Championship, really struggling. Again, though, was that, do you think, a big day for the club, or do you think it was just one of them, semi-finals that, of course, just happened, and unfortunately, Walsall were unable to get the job done?
I think because I was at the game before that when we smashed Port Vale at their ground, and the atmosphere that day was amazing. But then we went to the playoffs, and it was like there wasn't no effort there for me because obviously on aggregate score we got demolished. But Barnsley that season came from relegation to playoffs, so I don't think anyone could take away how well they did that season, and it was a strong opposition. And as you said, they're always Championship League One, so I think the better team overall won, in my opinion.
Yeah, want to ask as well about who your favourite ever Walsall player and manager is.
Oh, so see, obviously I know there's some managers that I know that I didn't unfortunately get the chance to witness, and that, like Ray Graydon and all that, which our fans absolutely love. For me, best player that I've probably witnessed live, I really liked at the time when he was at the club, Romain Sawyers, at the time when he was there, because I thought that was his peak. Obviously went on to play in the Premier League, and I don't think he's ever cut it into us. I also think Otsuma, when he was there, was I loved watching Otsuma because he was like a little magician. But we've had some really good players over the years, like Will Grigg and all that, some good strikers. But if I'm going to have to go with one, personally, for striking and all that, I might give it to Tom Bradshaw. Tom Bradshaw was a really good striker for us. So,
yeah, I mean, doing very well with Millwall now as well. What about manager, though? Any managers for you that stand out?
It is difficult to think of like just managers. I think who was the manager just before when we was in the playoff push again? I can't really remember. That's the only problem.
I can't remember that far back myself, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, recent times, I know you've had Darryl Clark and, of course, Taylor, but anything after that, though, yeah, it's a bit of a blur to myself.
Yeah, because I know John Whitney came in it was Dean Smith. Dean Smith, I think Dean Smith is the best manager I've saw for Walsall, because in my lifetime, properly supporting Walsall, he's gave us the best chance of going to the Championship and everything. So for me, obviously, probably unpopular in other people's opinion, but for me, Dean Smith, from what I've witnessed. So,
yeah, Dean Smith, of course, had a spell in the Premier League as well with Aston Villa, now back there with Norwich City for the time being, at least. Obviously, as well, when it comes to Walsall, I mentioned this to a lot of clubs when you've been in a league for a few years. Does it worry you as a Walsall fan that, getting stuck in League Two? I mean, obviously you see clubs like go down, like Sunderland, for example, in League One, got relegated from the Championship. Many people thought they'd come straight back up and pretty much walk the league. It doesn't really work like that. I think every league in England is getting tougher, really, especially in the EFL. And do you fear in a way for Walsall that could be the case, that, when you've been in a league for a few years, it gets harder and harder to get out of?
I do. I am genuinely worried with how it's looking, because we've obviously been in the league for 2 years now, and we don't look like we're making any progression to try and get out of the league. It just looks like we're happy with accepting mid-table mediocrity. And as a Walsall fan, I think we're one of the bigger clubs in the league, and I do think that we should be pushing on the playoffs, but we don't. And you see these teams that ain't the best or haven't got the same sort of facilities or funds we have, and that they are pushing up the table. So I am worried at the moment as a Walsall fan. When are we going to get out of League Two?
Yeah, and I want to ask about Walsall's local rivals. See, I'm from Stafford, so I'm quite close to Walsall, really. So I've always wanted to know, who are, in your opinion, Walsall's local rivals? Like, which team have you played and would you be most looking forward to facing in the local area?
Obviously, we got all our local rivals that I'm around, but I don't really see them as rivals because we don't play them like the Wolves, the West Broms, the Aston Villas, Birminghams. Personally, for me, being in League Two at the moment, it has to be Port Vale. When we beat Port Vale 1-0 at their ground and seeing all the fans, that was my favourite game of the season so far, because I think there's a genuine proper hatred towards each other there. And I think also a team that are lower that are sort of rivals is Shrewsbury. Obviously, they're in League One at the moment, but I think we're sort of rivals with them as well, personally.
Yeah, and final question for you as well, I'm going to ask is, if you also predict right now where you think Walsall will finish this season, whereabouts are you saying?
I'm going to say about 13th or 12th, I personally think. I'm going to go with 12th just to be the hypers, but I think roughly around there. I think it's going to be just a mid-table season. I think we're going to lose a few players, and then we're going to have to try and rebuild again next year. So...
Yeah, and I also one final question for you as well, obviously, about your YouTube channel, obviously. Do you want to explain to the viewers about that?
I do a YouTube channel based on football in general. It ain't just Walsall or anything. I do reviews on some Premier League games if I've watched them or whatever. It's called Jamie Talks Football. It ain't that popular, but if you would be willing to put a link or something in the description, then that's it. They'd probably have to find it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no problem. And about that, then, if you do follow the Premier League a fair bit, I mean, what about the Premier League then this season? What have been your thoughts on that?
I've thought that it's an interesting one. I think City are definitely going to run away with it so far, because I did watch the City versus Chelsea game, and to be honest, Chelsea didn't look on the ball, and they're obviously another one of the title favourites. And I think the bottom three is pretty much predictable with who's going to go down. I think there's only a bit of argument for who's finishing 18th, but I think another team that's really underperformed is Everton. I think Everton are having a shocker this season, personally, considering how much of an established club they are. To be sitting in 16th isn't good. No.
Of course, they just parted company as well with Rafa Benitez, of course, one that was always going to be difficult to see working out due to his previous Liverpool connections and success. But yeah, that's all we've got time for this evening anyway, Jamie, on STW Sports. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's a pleasure having you on and meeting you. And yeah, good luck to Walsall for the rest of the season.
All right, thanks, mate.